In the heart of Greenwich Village, where cobblestone streets whispered tales of artists and dreamers, a bleak December wind howled. Inside a small apartment, a young artist named Johnsy lay motionless, her face pale against the pillows. Pneumonia had claimed her strength, leaving her to stare blankly at the brick wall across from her window. On that wall, an old ivy vine clung for life, its leaves dwindling with each passing day. Her roommate, Sue, a fellow painter with a kind and practical heart, tried everything to coax her back to health. "Johnsy, you have to eat something," she pleaded, her voice filled with a warmth that couldn't quite reach her friend's despair. But Johnsy's gaze remained fixed on the ivy. "Sue," she whispered, her voice barely a breath, "when the last leaf falls, I must go too." "I know it." Sue's heart clenched. "Don't be foolish, Johnsy. A leaf has nothing to do with your life. You have to fight." But Johnsy's will was as fragile as the leaves themselves. She had surrendered to the idea that her fate was tied to that single, dwindling vine. "I've counted them," she'd say, a hollow cough rattling her thin frame. "Soon, there will be none left." As the days grew colder and shorter, Johnsy's condition worsened. The doctor's words of encouragement, Sue's constant care, nothing could break through the wall of hopelessness she had built around herself. Her world had shrunk to the size of the window pane and the final. Trembling leaves clinging to the brick. In the same building lived an old artist named Behrman. He was a gruff, cantankerous man who had spent a lifetime chasing his masterpiece, a dream that always seemed just out of reach. He often grumbled about the foolishness of the young artists, but beneath his thorny exterior was a heart as soft as his worn-out paintbrushes. He cared for Sue and Johnsy as if they were his own. When Sue, desperate and afraid, told him about Johnsy's morbid obsession with the last leaf, Behrman scoffed and muttered about such silly fantasies. But his eyes, usually clouded with artistic frustration, filled with a fierce, protective light. Alone in his cluttered studio, surrounded by blank canvases, he paced and fumed. "That poor little girl," he growled to himself. "She will not die because of a leaf." That night, a storm of biblical proportions descended upon the village. A vicious wind tore through the narrow streets, and a freezing rain, mixed with wet snow, lashed against the windows. The old ivy vine shuddered violently, its few remaining leaves ripped away. By the gale, through the long, dark hours, only one leaf remained, clinging desperately to its branch. Behrman could not stay in his warm studio. He pulled on his threadbare coat, gathered his paints and brushes, and stepped out into the tempest. The wind tried to knock him off his feet, and the icy rain soaked him to the bone. He dragged a heavy ladder across the street and propped it against the brick wall. Climbing into the storm, he reached the branch where the last leaf trembled, fighting for its life. All through the brutal night, while the storm raged, old Behrman worked. With a steady hand and a heart full of purpose, he painted on the cold, wet brick. Under the flickering gaslight, he created his masterpiece. It was a leaf, perfect in every detail: its veins, its serrated edges, its lingering touch of green and yellow. He painted it to look as if it were anchored to the vine, strong and defiant against the wind. When his work was done, he stumbled back to his studio, exhausted, drenched, and shivering, but with a quiet sense of triumph. The next morning, the storm had passed. "Sue," Johnsy whispered weakly, "pull up the shade. I want to see." Sue, her own heart heavy with dread, slowly raised the blind. She braced herself for the bare vine, for the final blow to her friend's spirit. But they both gasped. There, against the brick wall, was a single ivy leaf. It had survived the wind, the rain, the snow. It was still there. It hasn't fallen, Johnsy breathed, her eyes wide with a disbelief that slowly blossomed into wonder. Tears streamed down Sue's face. "See, Johnsy, it's still there. Now you have to live. You have to get better." For the first time in weeks, a flicker of hope ignited in Johnsy's soul. Something, some force of nature or miracle, had defied her grim prediction. That one stubborn leaf gave her a reason to fight. But the morning's triumph did not extend to the studio downstairs. Old Bearman had caught a violent chill during his night in the storm. The doctor was called, and the diagnosis was the same as Johnsy's: pneumonia. But Bearman was old and frail. He had no fight left in him. A few days later, he passed away. In his final moments, a faint, contented smile touched his lips. He had finally painted his masterpiece. As Johnsy slowly regained her strength, her appetite, and her will to live returned, she sat up in bed, color returning to her cheeks. She never knew the full story of the night, but she knew something miraculous had happened. The painted leaf remained on the wall, a silent, steadfast sentinel through the changing seasons. It became a symbol of her own survival. "You'll paint again, Johnsy," Sue would say, her voice full of relief and love. "The world is waiting for your art." And she did. Johnsy returned to her easel with a renewed spirit, her work filled with a depth and gratitude it never had before. She would often look out the window at the leaf that never wavered, never fell, a constant reminder of the gift of a second chance. She never learned that Bearman's masterpiece wasn't a grand painting on a canvas, but a single leaf painted on a brick wall. It was a masterpiece not of art, but of love. A masterpiece that cost him his life but saved hers. And so, in the quiet heart of Greenwich Village, the story of the last leaf lives on, a testament to the silent sacrifices we make for one another and the profound, life-giving power of hope. Thank you for watching. If this story touched you, please like, share, and subscribe for more tales of the human spirit.